Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Aether Hub and another Magic the Gathering video. Today we have the final climatic chapter of Zendikar Rising's official story. How will the fate of Zendikar be decided? Will the Lithomancer Nahiri purge the royal from the plane, killing its heart but ushering in a safer world for her people? Or will the elf Nissa stop her, saving her elemental companions and keeping her home wild and untamed? Jace Beleren is stuck between a seemingly logical conclusion on one hand and helping a friend he struggles to understand on the other. It all comes to a head here with our finale, Two Guardians. Before we hop into the story though, just wanted to remind you Vorthos fans out there that if you enjoy the content here, you can support the Aether Hub over on Patreon. We have a lot of great perks going out to supporters, including access to other videos far in advance of their YouTube debut. Make sure to check out that and all the other benefits by following the link in the description below. And don't forget to tick that notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. And with that, let's get into the lore. Nissa, Nahiri, and Jace stand at the shattered, ruined entrance of the Singing City, a place they all three barely escaped with their minds intact. Nahiri had failed in her mission to place the lithoform core, the relic that holds the power to reshape Zendikar, at the center of the city, a focal point of mana ley lines that could have amplified its power. Nissa had destroyed that point, leaving Nahiri with few options, but plenty of fury towards the elf. Jace, who despite being a friend of Nissa's and coming to Zendikar originally to help her, now understood what Nahiri was looking to achieve. He hoped to play some mediating role between the two stubborn planeswalkers, knowing they both wanted Zendikar to be strong, but just differed on the manner in which to achieve that strength. He hoped to take the lithoform core to Ravnica, to study its power, learn to control it, and hopefully come to a conclusion that fit everyone's needs. But this was a fool's hope. Nissa and Nahiri would go to war over the fate of Zendikar. Nissa stood looking as powerful as she felt, with the whole of Zendikar behind her. Scores of elementals were awaiting her command. The plane fought with her. Nahiri felt a fear she seldom experienced anymore. She had faced Eldrazi, her immortal vampire mentor, an evil world-conquering planeswalker. Yet this elf would prove more a problem than anything she had faced before. It was hard for this proud core to admit. Nahiri began to shift the stones of the Singing City, while Nissa whispered a single command: defend Zendikar. Nahiri had always believed in the strength of stone, the permanence of it, but against the endless assault of Nissa's elementals, beings of root and grass, even the strong bedrock began to crumble to their speed and ferocity. Though Nahiri was quick in her spellcast, every other opponent proved more a challenge. Nissa created an eagle made of moss and vines, with wings, talons, and a beak. It looked and acted just as a real eagle would have, only this thing was under the control of Nissa. It swooped down, grabbing Nahiri by digging deep into the soft flesh of her shoulders. In defense, before being lifted into the air, Nahiri conjured 30 molten swords and seared them into the vegetative bird. With a shriek, it let go, only for Nahiri to be faced with another elemental made of moist moss and algae, landing a kick hard with its watery limbs, sending her flying. Jace too was being attacked, with Nissa no longer seeing him as her ally. Now he was just another enemy, another case of betrayal working alongside Nahiri. Jace didn't want to harm the elementals, knowing how much Nissa cared for them, instead opting to use illusions to scare and distract them as he dodged their attacks. Fire was an obvious choice. These were plant monsters after all. Their natural predator was fire, but Jace also conjured images of the Eldrazi, which worked just as well. It seemed Zendikar still feared the devouring presence of the Eldrazi even far after their defeat. Fighting off the back foot, Nahiri began to doubt herself. These elementals were the embodiment of Zendikar, its will, and it fought fervently for Nissa. Nahiri fought with nothing, but she composed herself. Why did she start on this adventure? Why did she want to see Zendikar strong again? She knows the dangers of the multiverse, what evils lurk, ready to cause Zendikar harm once again. The royals needed to end so that its people could build up, become strong, ready to defend their world again if needed. She didn't fight with nothing, she fought for something. She was the protector of the very foundation of Zendikar. She knocked away another elemental, entered a battle stance, and hurled 50 more glowing magma swords right at her enemy, Nissa. This madness, this chaos, needed to end. Nissa was shocked at the spell's speed and accuracy, especially as Nahiri was forced into a more defensive position. But still, it was no match for her elementals, as another used its thick tree trunk arm to deflect the attack. Nahiri began to very much sour on these creatures, knowing this was a war she could not win in an open battle. Nahiri took the lithoform core back to the Singing City. With its plethora of stone available for her spells, she could defend herself and the core more easily. This relic, it was key to her victory. It had to be protected at all costs. Jace's attention also turned to the lithoform core. If he were to broker a peace between Nahiri and Nissa, he needed the core to be in neutral hands. Thinking of the core's power, what he witnessed and felt, it urged him to learn more. He kept thinking back to the terrible secret he kept from the multiverse, from his friends. Bolas surviving the War of the Spark. No longer a planeswalker and trapped in his own prison dimension, but he was still very much alive. From Ugin's perspective, it's not like Bolas could remain sparkless forever. With enough time, which he had ample of, the God Dragon could return. Jace wondered of what weapons they could use to stop such a threat again. Maybe this lithoform core could have knocked Bolas out for good, or before he even created so much destruction. Jace obviously couldn't say for certain, but if studying it and other relics could help protect the multiverse from the likes of another Bolas or other threats, it was worth a second look at least. Jace conjured a fog, concealing his movements as he too escaped into the Singing City after Nahiri. Behind him, a loud boom catches his attention. Nahiri had sealed the city's entrance, trapping them both inside. Nahiri had turned the Singing City into her own fortress. It took all of her concentration and effort to hold it together as an army of elementals pounded against her walls, but for now, she was able to think of her next move. Only she wasn't alone. Jace approached, wanting to discuss more of their previous plan. To remove the lithoform core from Zendikar, study it on Ravnica, ensure it doesn't destroy the plane and actually achieves a stronger Zendikar. But Nahiri was done listening, done with these weak planeswalkers who couldn't see the reality clearly in front of them. Zendikar needed to be strong. That wasn't possible now with it being broken. The royal running amok. Though Jace pleaded with Nahiri, not wanting to fight with her, it was clear her mind was set. Nissa would not take this chance from her, and neither would Jace. As Nahiri commands a few loose hedrons to surround Jace, she wanted to ensure that her face was the last thing he ever saw. But her attack didn't come. Another had joined the fight, someone familiar, her old mentor, Sorin Markov, the immortal vampire of Innistrad, her friend turned foe, the being she once trusted with her very life, the life of Zendikar, only to be betrayed. She had already taken her vengeance though, bringing untold devastation to his home of Innistrad, killing his house of vampires and leaving him encased in his own stone prison, unable to move or planeswalk, forced to watch his plane slowly devoured by the Eldrazi. That thought made Nahiri smile, but Sorin's expression didn't share that ironic smirk. Sorin pulled out his weapon and leapt from the stone wall, Nahiri cursing as if things couldn't get any worse. But in a blink, he was gone, only to appear a blink later right beside her swinging his sword. Quick reflexes and a stone pillar were the only things that spared her life. How did he move so fast? With the rubble of her attack clearing, there was no sign of Sorin. An illusion? Jace was attacking her without moving a muscle, creating an exact copy of the one she hated most, at least in the past, to draw out her fears and frustrations. But her realization was a moment too late, as another thick fog again obscured Jace. Nahiri felt this fog seep into her very thoughts. Her mind was no longer her own. Jace was able to use his telepathy to control Nahiri's movements. He felt the strong will of her thoughts fight against his control. He didn't have much time. That, coupled with him keeping his silencing spell up to drown out the maddening hum of the Singing City itself, meant time was crucial. He didn't need Nahiri for long. Jace only needed her to stand still so he could steal the lithoform core from her satchel, taking it without a fight, letting its power and unsettling whispers grow in his hands before commanding Nahiri to remove the stone walls around them and making his escape. Options raced before Jace. He could just leave now for Ravnica. Without the core, Nissa and Nahiri would have no reason to continue this fight. It would be safe there. But he thought of his friend Nissa, who already felt betrayed. He couldn't just leave with the core without explaining things to her. The damage to their friendship would be immeasurable. He rushed out of the city only to be faced with Ashaya, the nearly sentient will of Zendikar, and the largest elemental Jace had ever seen, clearly a true friend of Nissa's. Ashaya reached down and grabbed the Mind Mage, with Jace only able to utter, "I need to talk to Nissa," which was enough to earn the Planeswalker an audience. Ashaya felt the power emanating from the core Jace now held, grabbing it from him and tossing it over its shoulder right into the open hands of Nissa. Jace struggled in Ashaya's grasp, speaking to Nissa telepathically, but Nissa was in a less than trusting mood. Jace wants peace. Peace would only give Nahiri a chance to be as ruthless as she's proven she can be. Jace wants to take the core to Ravnica to study it, but what if it destroys that plane instead? Jace breaks down, admitting that the Gatewatch could use this power, that there's something he knows that she doesn't, that there will and are other battles that they would face. In the distance, the two could hear the angry screams of a very pissed off Lithomancer. Nahiri had come to and was charging for them. Nissa sent scores of elementals to block her path, even sending vines to trip her up just to slow her down. But another voice spoke out to her. Not Jace's, but there was a second voice in her mind. It came from the lithoform core itself. What were indecipherable whispers to others came out very clear to her. It spoke, claiming to be the voice of Zendikar, her ally, urging her to use the core. Nahiri and Jace were both screaming at her for the core, but she couldn't hear them. Zendikar claimed that this relic was a very old piece of it, its full power. The ancient core created and captured its essence to undo damage. Nissa's mind was torn. Was this a trick? Some ancient evil or leftover corruption of the Eldrazi, begging her to unleash more destruction? Was this truly Zendikar, and this core was actually its salvation? The means to heal the broken pieces while keeping the elemental soul free? Turning back to the telepath, Nissa asks her old friend, "Will you help me?" Jace senses something big is about to happen. Whatever that was, Jace was gonna be there for her. Nahiri believed that Nissa would destroy the core, prevent Zendikar's healing in her misguided attempt to cling onto the broken bits of the world she knows. Nahiri knew the world as it was, whole and prepared for anything, a world she could return with the core. She berates Nissa for her past mistakes, how everything she touches dies and falls apart. That in this instance, this would just be another notch in a long list of failures. Nahiri summoned what seemed like countless Hedrons, charging them for a massive attack while Nissa reached into the power of the lithoform core itself. Her mind was filled with doubt, but the voice, Zendikar, asked her to trust her strength. If she did not wish to destroy, as Nahiri would have, then all she had to do was believe in her own strength, her own convictions, and her own idea of Zendikar. With that, Nissa let go. There's a flash, and then silence. Nissa opens her eyes slowly. The world seemed still. Where the Singing City once stood, only rubble remained. A thick dust covered what once was a battlefield. Her elementals lying motionless, covered in a blanket of dark gray. She whispers to herself, "No, not again. What have I done?" She dropped to her knees by a dying tree, patting a falling elemental. It looked up, opening what could be described as its eye, blinking slowly as if awakening for the first time. Staring up at Nissa, the elemental was alive. All around her, the forces of Zendikar were rising once again. It worked! It actually worked! She could sense Zendikar healing from its long injuries suffered by the Eldrazi. Their gnawing nothingness was gone. Zendikar was whole, but remained wild. In her hand, the dormant lithoform core's glow faded, its power expended, but it served its ancient purpose. She hears Nahiri and Jace slowly get back up, but Nissa was more interested in hearing the cheers of Zendikar, a voice only she understood. Rising on roots, Nissa shed a tear of joy and whisked herself away to her home of Balaged, finally regrowing after so many years. Jace picked up the empty core, examining the strong elementals rising around them, full of life and vigor. He understands now how Nissa feels about these things. It's the same way he felt about his city after the War of the Spark, a feeling he could finally understand. The dust around him gave way to tangling roots, growing unnaturally quick. Life was blooming again, like a forest fire breathing new life into a land devoid of nutrients. Nahiri asks if the power is gone, and Jace doesn't know. But what Nahiri does know is that this power wasn't Nissa's to use. It was made by the core. Her being a core should have used it. But Jace doesn't agree. He was in Nissa's mind. He knew that what Nissa believed in brought about this outcome. Nahiri would have just killed the soul of Zendikar. A quick fix to stitch things together, but Nissa, her result, would be a long, steady, and stronger growth of Zendikar. Jace realizes that they were wrong. They needed to apologize to Nissa, but Nahiri knew that could never be. No apology could undo whatever damage Jace had done to their friendship. Not after this, and on top of all the other past mistakes he had made. Nahiri, being a bad loser, just loves to prey on others' insecurities, leaving him with words similar to what she spoke to Nissa. Whenever you try to do good, you just make things worse. And Nahiri planeswalks away. Jace thought in solace, apologizing to Nissa under his breath and in his mind. But looking around, he knew that even broken things could be redeemed. And there you guys go, the final chapter of official Zendikar Rising story, and I don't know how to feel about it. When I think back on the entire story as a single piece of work, I'm left wondering what actually went on and which characters actually grew from this. Are there any long-lasting consequences? Maybe that's something to discuss in a later sort of analysis video. For chapter 5 though, it looks like Zendikar as a plane has been healed of the Eldrazi's damages and is back to OG status. But, then again, not Nahiri's version of it. Seems like ultimately Nissa was right about everything and Nahiri just comes off as being an evil prick. Like, the story doesn't outwardly say this, but it feels like if Nahiri completed her plans, it would have just been objectively worse for Zendikar. Either way, Nissa feels happy again, kinda makes some sort of connection with Jace again at the end there, despite Jace believing he really screwed up. I don't get that sense from Nissa. It's like Nissa's just happy Zendikar saved. I can go way deeper into this, but like I said, best to make a separate video out of my final thoughts. Before wrapping up this video though, I just want to thank a friend of the channel, Vladislaugh. He provided the animations used in this and some previous videos, and they really added a lot more life to the story. You can follow him on Twitter with the same name, and I've also provided a link to his own YouTube channel in the description below. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed Chapter 5, the finale of Zendikar Rising. If you did and want to support future content here on the Aether Hub, make sure you check out our Patreon page linked in the description below. I have some exclusive content going up there soon, so you'd want to check that out. You can also support the channel by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, and of course subscribing. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!